Good, visible. So we're on, what stuff is this? Some Ayin Aleph. And we're in the middle of the subject of Orel is not allowed to eat Truma. That's the Mishnah, beginning, the name of the parak, Orel, that an uncircumcised Kohen is not allowed to eat Truma. And more about that, a Bryce, so what's the source? We're in the middle of the source. And we had a Bryce, Rabbi Lezer said one drasha, Rabbi Kiva said another drasha, Rabbi Lezer said it's a Gzer Shava, Toshav V'Sachir, Toshav V'Sachir, that it says by Korban Pesach, and Truma. And you learn out whatever it says by Korban Pesach applies to Truma also. Not everything, we said that not everything is going to be transferred with this Gzer Shava, but that was a source according to Rabbi Lezer to learn out that Orel is not allowed to eat Truma the same way by Pesach, also by Truma. Rabbi Kiva in the Bryce said another drasha, and that's what we're up to. And the Gemara now is going to analyze his drasha. This was the Bryce I mentioned a page ago, that by Tumah, by the din that the tummy is not allowed to eat Truma. So it says ish mizar aron butza ruah because the shimlo yochel, that a tummy is not eat Truma. Kohen tummy is not allowed to eat Truma, and it has a word over there ish that I didn't have to say that. Every man whose tummy should. So from the extra word, we learn now that it's coming also to Orel. I got this term that says tummy and it's referring to an Orel. That's what the Gemara learns out. Taisa says earlier that he considers an Orel as a little bit tummy. Not that it's really a tummy, but it has the same halachas as a tummy. Anyway, now the Gemara is going to analyze Rabbi Kiva. The aim of the rabbis is own. This is more or less the same question that we had on Rabbi Lezer's drasha, that if he made a Gzer Shava from Pesach to Truma, to learn out other things also, learn out that onen, just like he's not allowed to eat Korban Pesach, he shouldn't be allowed to eat Truma. And the Gemara deal that with Rabbi Elazar's drasha. The Gemara is asking a similar question on Rabbi Kiva's drasha. It just says ish, some kind of riboy, some kind of including more, something to add. It's an extra word. So how do you know what to be married? How do you know Orel? Maybe onen, and that's not true. And onen is allowed to eat Truma. So it's going to be more or less copy and paste. It's going to be the same Gemara until we get to the end of this discussion. But the Gemara in the beginning is going to go the same way as it did the page ago. Amar Rav Yossi Rav Chanina, Amar Krav V'chol Zohar. Zohar Samati L'chav Lo Onin. We have a pasuk that comes to say that no, that an onen is allowed to eat Truma because it says Zohar is not allowed to eat Truma. And that pasuk is coming to say Dafka Zohar, and therefore Dafka non-Kohen is not allowed to eat Truma. But the pasuk is coming, there's some word over there that has a nuance that something else is mutter. And we're going to say it's referring to an onen. But again, we have the same problem as yesterday, that it doesn't say here onen, it doesn't say over there Orel. We're being, what is the word, shributi? We're just like deciding by our muscles. We're saying this is an Orel, this is an onen. Like who says? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the pasuk that's coming to say that a Zohar is puzzle and not something, maybe it's coming to say that Orel is not puzzle. Maybe we have one pasuk that says something else is puzzle, something else, another pasuk that says something else is not puzzle. How do you know which? We say the Orel is puzzle and onen is kosher. How do you know? Maybe it's the opposite. So we have a pasuk that says something is mutter. Maybe Orel is mutter. No, it says a pasuk something is usher. Okay, Mara is. How do you know which one yes, which one not? We do the same thing as yesterday. That if you have one pasuk that says something is puzzle, one pasuk that says something is mutter, we're going to use our svara to say which one is worse. And if you have the two choices, Orel and onen, which one is worse? So Mamish, same discussion as yesterday. It has a remez over here, like a, what is it called, a mnemonic to tell you this simon over here. But then the Gemara is going to say what they mean. There are 5 things that Orel has worse than onen. One is that it's an act. You have to do an act in order to become circumcised. Ma'aseh b'gufo is something on his person, which is not like by an onen. On his kores, if a person doesn't do a circumcision, he's chayiv kores. Yeshon lefnei adibur, the mitzvah of Mila was before Sinai, and onen is not. Milas charav avodah ma'keves, that if a person not only his own circumcision, also the circumcision of his sons or avodim also stops him from eating the korban pesach. We find that. So therefore, there are five chumras that you have Orel over onen. Maybe on the opposite, we have things of onen that don't apply to Orel. One, number 2, number 3, there are 3 things that the onen has that Orel does not have. One is that it can happen again and again. uncircumcised only be one time. Once he circumcises, he can't become uncircumcised. And onain could happen again. Onain applies to women also if they have a relative who died. They're also an onain, not allowed to eat Korban Pesach. And also in Gadol Takanas, but there's no way that he can make himself not an onain within the day that the relative died. There's no way to get out of it. Lashenk and Orel, he can circumcise it right away whenever he wants to. So there are three things that you find the onain is more chomer than Orel. So how do you know which is more? So first of all, the Gemara says Hanach Nefishin is 5 against 3. These are more than the others. So if you have a choice, which is more chomer, Orel or onain, we'll say that Orel is. And Rava Amar, this is all so far the same as yesterday. But now the next one is a little different than yesterday because yesterday we were talking about Korban Pesach, learning out from Korban Pesach. That was yesterday's Joshua. Rabbi Lezer was learning out Toshav Socher. So then he answered something in relation to Korban Pesach. That is, Joshua says openly over here, and this is only the din of Orel is open by Korban Pesach, and the din of Onain is not. But now we're not talking about that. Now we're talking about the question of Ish. What is the din that it says by Truma that the Ish is not allowed to eat it? But Truma, how do we know which one to be marba, an Orel or an Onain? So Rabbi has another terrace over here. Rav, yesterday, Yaakov, you were on Rab's side. You see what it says over here. Even without this far, 5 against 3, also, we're not going to take Onain above Orel. Orel is going to be possible and not Onain. Ish. If the place where the pasuk chose to tell us this hint that something else is tamei is a puzzle for Truma, besides tamei, something else, it uses the word ish, every man. So it's true that it's a riboy, it's a neutral kind of a riboy, but the fact that it uses the word ish, so it's probably going to be something which is something about a man, something masculine. And Orel, so uncircumcised, has only to do with men, doesn't have to do with women. Mashenkin only, it applies to both the men and women. That's not in the mashmos of the pasuk. So that's the reason why ish, if you have a choice of Orel or Onain, we're going to choose that Orel is the one that the pasuk means to say is excluded from eating truma, and the Onain is not. So we worked on the drasha, we figured out Rabbi Kiva's drasha, and the last thing left before we go on from the drasha is to always ask, like always, what does each one do with the other one's drasha? Rabbi Lezer's drasha was from Gzera Shav Toshav Sacher Tashav Sacher from Korban Pesach. Rabbi Kiva's drasha was, it says ish by Truma, which is Marba Orel Tamei. What does each one do with the other one's drasha? And that's going to be the next two Gemaras. Rabbi Kiva, what does he do with Toshav Sacher? And Rabbi Lezer, what does he do with ish? So the Gemara starts. Rabbi Kiva, hi Toshav Sacher, my overlay. What does he do with this drasha of Rabbi Eliezer? Rav Shmaya lasuye Arabi mahul ve'gavoni mahul or gavnuni. It says in the side, didn't give gavnuni. It was a nation. It means a guy who circumcised. A guy that's circumcised that you don't know it from kol orel yochelbo because he's circumcised. He's not usually going uncircumcised, and usually Jews are circumcised.
Didn't say Arabi.
It says Arabi.
So that's they have a minhagim of Avraham.
I'm not sure what you mean to say.
I mean, it's a goy. It's not only a goy; it's an Arabi who anyway do circumcision.
That's what we're talking about. That's what the Gemara says. That the reason why it has to say Toshav V'Sachir is to say that someone, even if he's circumcised, he's still not allowed to eat. If it just would have said Orel should not eat, so then there are some goyim that do circumcise. So you might think that an Arab who's circumcised, or another nation, Givoni or Gavnuni, that was also had a custom to circumcise, you might think that they would be allowed to eat. So it says no. Toshav V'Sachir is not allowed to eat. But the Gemara right away says that's not true. A circumcised goy is not considered circumcised. And an uncircumcised, is that considered circumcised? Just because they physically cut off the foreskin, does that make them considered circumcised? But tonight we learned in the Mishnah, a person made a neder, I'm not going to have a no or give a no, take a no from uncircumcised. So we would say that it depends if he's circumcised or not. And we might think that an uncircumcised Jew is included, and a circumcised goy, uncircumcised Jew is a Orel, and a circumcised goy is not an Orel. So it says no, it's not true. He is not does not include an uncircumcised Jew. An uncircumcised Jew is not called an Orel. Even though he's uncircumcised, but as far as the terminology, he's not called an Orel. And the opposite, even a circumcised goy is considered an Orel.
So then there is the Korban Pesach?
No, a person made a neder. I'm not going to benefit from this person.
Oh.
So who does he include? Yeah, I made a neder. I'm not going to benefit from this person. I'm not going to benefit from this person. So who does it include? So I said I'm not going to benefit from an uncircumcised person. Who does that include? It includes goyim. It doesn't include Jews, and it doesn't make a difference if they're circumcised or not.
What about a willful Jew who willfully doesn't circumcise?
Here it says he doesn't mean to say Jews. He only means goyim. When he says uncircumcised, and it says the opposite, konim shani nene lemuvim. If you made a neder, konim means a neder. I'm not going to be nene from a circumcised person. So here it's the opposite. Mulim is only going to be a Jew.
Who is not circumcised, who is not.
Before was Arelim, here's Mulim. I'm not sure what we're holding. Where are you holding? First it says Konam Shaninena Larelim.
Shani, I'm sorry, I thought she was Aina. Okay,
Shaninena. I'm not sure what the Lashon means, if I'm going to, if I'm not going to, but the point is, who's called an Arelim? Here it says that Goyim are called Arelim, even if they're circumcised. And the contrary, it says in the next line, Konam Shaninena Lamulim. He used the term of a mul, a person who is circumcised. So who does that include? Mutar b'mulei goyim v'aser b'ar le'Yisrael. Even a circumcised goy is not called circumcised, and an uncircumcised Jew is called circumcised. So the Gemara doesn't want to accept this. The Gemara means to say that even if he's physically circumcised, that doesn't make a difference. And the pasuk says that we would have already known that a circumcised goy is not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach because he's not. He made a nana. I'm not going to be nana from a mulim, someone who's circumcised. So he's mutter to be nana from a guy who's circumcised because he's not considered circumcised. Is that good?
I thought the netter was I will get benefit.
I will not. I mean, that means I'm not going to have benefit from him.
I'm not going to get benefit.
So he's mutter to a guy even though he's circumcised because the circumcised guy is not considered circumcised. So more or less that's the Gemara's kasha that this terrace that the Gemara said you need a pasuk to say that a guy who's circumcised is also also the Korban Pesach. That goes without saying because he's considered the pasuk alone that would have said Kol Orel Yocholbo already means that also Orel includes a guy even if he would be physically circumcised. So the Gemara is still looking. What is Rabbi Akiva going to do with the words Toshav V'Sacher, which is extra? It's extra by Korban Pesach. We said by Truma it's not extra, but the word Toshav V'Sacher that it says by Korban Pesach is extra. What does he need it for? So the Gemara says Ela Lasuye Ger Shemol V'Lotoval and the Katan Shenolat Kishumol for Kosav V'Sarch Latav Menu Dambris. If a ger he became a convert, he converted. And what does a convert have to do? He has to circumcise and immerse. What if you only circumcised? So it's not enough. So here it says that's what it's coming to say. It's coming to say that if he's not an orel because he's circumcised, but he's not eating the Korban Pesach because he's still not Jewish because he didn't immerse. He has to immerse also. This was machlokus a couple of pages, many pages ago on the Daf Vav. We paskin like this that he has to be circumcised and also mikvah till he immersed. He's not Jewish, and that's what it's saying over here. That even though he's an orel, he's still Toshav V'Sachir is coming to say that there's still some people, even though they're not Arelim, they still may not eat the Korban Pesach. That would be a ger who's in the middle of the process. He does circumcised and he didn't yet immerse. Another case would be a katan shenola kishu mol. A baby was born circumcised. He was born without a foreskin. So does he have to go through any process in order to be able to be considered Nemo? So he's called Orel Yocholbo. He's not an Orel, he doesn't have a foreskin. But this Tana Rav Akiva is going to hold that it's not enough. He has to also take some blood. Latif, like question of dripping, tipim, that he has to drip. You have to take some blood, you have to let some blood. And that's the halacha that a katan that was born without a foreskin, they do have to let some blood. So he wouldn't be able to eat the Korban Pesach until they did that. So that's why you have to have two psukim, Toshav V'Sachir. One is for a ger who did not yet finish the process of gerus because he only had Mila and didn't yet have Tvila. And the other pasuk, Sachir, the other one is going to tell you that a Katan Shenolat also wouldn't be able, I mean, it could be that he's a grown-up now, but he never had a Tafas Dam Bris. Even though he was born without a foreskin and he's not an orel, he still wouldn't eat from the Korban Pesach until he had a Tafas Dam Bris that some blood should be let.
In terms of our forefathers that were born circumcised.
So yeah, Tafas Dam Bris. Okay, but Rabbi Lezer, now Gemara goes back. Always maybe have this kind of discussion. What does the other one do? Now we have two things that Rabbi Lezer needs.
I'm surprised because Rabbi Avinu was commanded to do bris milah. So you can't rely on.
Rabbi Avinu was not.
Rabbi Avinu already had a tradition.
I'm not following, but I'm not following what you're saying.
Tradition to do milah.
Hashem told him to do milah.
So surely all his sons also.
I'm not following the question. He
didn't. No, I'm worried about. I'm trying to understand what you said.
There were certain whoever it was, Yosef Tzadik or David Melech, somebody. There were some sages who were born without. They were born.
So here the Gemara says, that even someone that's born without a foreskin, he still would have to let some blood. That's the Gemara.
Just like today.
Okay. Now the Gemara goes back like always. The Gemara says, "What does to do with these two things? Why his pasuk Toshav V'Sach is used up already because he used it for Gzeir Shabbat to learn out that oral is asati truma. So how does he know these two halachas about a ger shemol v'lo toval and a katan that needs a taraf stam bris? Rabbi Elazar, he argues on these two dinim. L'tameh, he goes according to his own reasoning, which we said already, someplace else. Dama, ger shemol v'lo tavel, ger malyo. He holds, it says that member, that he holds that a ger that only had circumcision without immersing is a good ger. So he doesn't have a pasuk for this because he holds a taka, he's kosher ger. And also, the other thing he argues on, he holds that if he was born without a foreskin, he wouldn't have to have bled any blood. So he doesn't need these psukim because he doesn't hold these halachas. So the Gemara successfully explained what Rabbi Akiva would do with Tosha V'Socher. One is going to be for a ger who only circumcised and did not yet do tefillah. He can eat the korban pesach. The other one is to tell you that a katan should know the kishu mal also has to have a tafas tamris. Now the Gemara goes the other way. What is Rabbi Elazar going to do with Rabbi Akiva's drasha? Rabbi Akiva said ish is an extra ribuy to tell you something else, to learn out that a Oriel is not allowed to eat truma. What does Rabbi Elazar do with this pasuk? That's the easy one. The answer is that doesn't see room for a drasha. That's normal way of talking. That's stylistic. To say ish is a normal way of talking, and therefore there's no necessity to make a new ribuy. And that's the end of the sugya. So from the beginning of the parak until now, we really had one sugya, even though a lot of information came in. It says that Oriel is not allowed to eat truma. It doesn't say so in the pasuk. So the whole drasha so far was where do you know it from? And we said two drushes, either Rabbi Elazar or Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Elazar learned from Gzer Shava, Toshav Sachir for Korban Pesach. Rabbi Akiva learned it from the word ish, that it says by truma, it's not allowed to eat a tummy, not eat truma. The word ish, it's coming to be marba, also on Oriel. Everybody agrees, and Oriel is not allowed to eat truma. New Gemara. According to everybody, Oriel is not allowed to eat truma. The question only is where you learn it out from. That's the word drusha. That was the whole sugya so far from the whole daf was only a drasha, but everybody agrees to halacha. There were some nafkaminas here as far as other halachas came out, nafkaminas halacha what they are. But as far as this halacha, nobody argues. Oriel is not allowed to eat truma. Nusagir, boy Rav Chama Ukva, Katan Oriel, Mahu Lasucho b'Shemen Shel Truma, Aulu Shelo b'Zman Makva or Lo Makva. What if you have a less than 8 day old baby? He's not circumcised. He's not supposed to be circumcised. Is he considered uncircumcised? As far as what? So the one has over here 1 or 2 nafkaminas. He's not gonna be. Okay, first, the easy one is gonna be.
He's not going to be eating.
He's not eating. Truma is not eating korban pesach. But the one does have nafkamina because not eating truma, but anointing him with truma, oil of truma. That a kohen is allowed to use oil to anoint himself. This, but if he's an Oriel, then a kohen Oriel is not allowed to. If he an adult kohen, he's an Oriel. He's not allowed to eat truma. He's not allowed to anoint himself with the oil of truma either, because as far as this goes, anointing is considered like eating. I guess sicha kishtia. So he's not allowed to anoint himself with truma. An kohen Oriel is not allowed to. So in Israel also, Israel or Kohen Oriel is not allowed to anoint themselves with oil of truma. Now you have a baby who's a Kohen, but he's not yet 8 days old. So he's an Oriel because he's not yet circumcised. He's not supposed to be circumcised. But is that considered an Oriel as far as this halacha that Oriel is not allowed to eat or be anointed with truma? Is that included? Is it only after he's 8?
There's enough in between if his mother is anointing him or he is.
No. The baby's not doing anything. The baby's 7 days old. But we're not.
His mother's anointing.
Yeah, right. We're not allowed to anoint Kohen Oriel.
So that's the same thing, even though
It's the same way you'd anoint a different Yisrael. You're not allowed to put oil onto a Yisrael. So you're putting it onto an Oriel. So if he's considered, what's the question? Maybe because he's not chayv in meal yet. It's before 8 days. But on the other hand, but he's still an Oriel. He's physically an Oriel. Is that considered an Oriel or not? That's one question. Also, the Gemara is going to soon say these words are Arelish Labazmana Ma'akva Lo Ma'akva. It sounds like the Gemara is just talking about truma. This case of anointing with truma oil to a katan Oriel. But it says Arelish Labazmana without its time means that it didn't yet come the time to circumcise it because he's only less than 8 days old. But the words ma'akva sounds a little bit like the other question, which is going to come up right away. We learned in passing that not only a person himself has to be circumcised and eat on the korban pesach, also his avadim or his sons also have to be circumcised. If somebody has a son who's not yet circumcised, he didn't circumcise him. It's already, let's say simple, he's already 8 days old and he didn't circumcise him, or he bought a slave, every Kanani, who has to be circumcised and he didn't circumcise him. So the owner, the father, is not allowed to eat truma either.
The father's not allowed.
It doesn't teach truma. So it doesn't say it might be a pasuk, or it's maybe it's a Rashi in the pasuk. It says that when you this is in Parashas Bo. It says Rashi brings up psukim, but I'll just open it up.
So if this is Makava, we would think maybe even the father.
Right. So if it means it's talking about korban pesach. Then the beginning of the Gemara says, you're allowed to anoint a young baby less than 8 days old who's not yet circumcised. Are you allowed to anoint him with oil of truma? And then it also says the Avela Shalobas Mana, which means the uncircumcised before its time. It's not yet 8 days old. Is that ma'akiv or not? The word ma'akiv or not doesn't apply to Truma so much. It should have said there's a pasal him or not. The word ma'akiv sounds a little bit like the other question, which we're going to see soon. That is it considered that the father is not allowed to eat the korban pesach because he has a son or an eved? An eved doesn't apply 7 days, but a son who's less than not yet circumcised. Just to get the psukim, it is interesting. The psukim we didn't. I think people would have noticed it. I wouldn't have known. So it says
it talked about Truma, so why is it talking about the korban pesach?
both of them. It's a question which has two applications. Both of them. Either you say the word makva here means there's a pasal in, and leave it by truma only.
Pasal.
The child, that the child cannot have truma anointed onto him.
I thought you said that if he can't, then maybe that means the father can't eat Truma either.
No. There's no such din. We said before. That's jumping to korban pesach. There's no such din that we said before that no such din that somebody's son starts him from eating truma. The din is only about korban pesach.
But it would stop him for korban pesach.
Right. Right. That's the pasuk it says in Parshas Bo. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe ba'aron zos kol kasach pasach kol ben echol lo yochol bo. V'cholev edish miknas kasef umalta also az yochol bo. It says any eved who was born by a man, who was born for money, circumcise him and then he may eat. So the simple pshat might mean then the eved's allowed to eat. That you buy an eved, he has to be circumcised in order to eat the korban pesach. But the Drash is that the owner can eat only after he circumcises his eved. This is the
an obligation. This is circumcised. And the whole time he's not fulfilling it, he may not eat korban pesach.
Right. And also it says a couple of sukkim later, it says V'chiyagu et choger v'asa pesach l'Hashem himo lo kol zachor v'zikrav la'asoso himo lo kol zachor v'zikrav la'asoso. The Gemara is mentioning also that a ger or any Jew that has a son, you have to circumcise the son in order to eat the korban pesach. So not only a person's own circumcision would stop him from eating the korban pesach if he's uncircumcised himself, even if he has a slave or a son who's not circumcised, also stops him from eating the korban pesach. That's also going to be a question in the Gemara. If he has a son which is less than 8 days old and he can't be circumcised, is that considered that he has an uncircumcised son?
Why not? Surely not.
Surely not what?
His time to have circumcision hasn't arrived.
Okay, you're taking a side. The Gemara has a question.
Oh, you mean
Yes, that's the most
Right
question.
now it mentions Truma, so why would
Right.
bring
I'm just
korban
thinking because the word ma'akva sounds a little bit strange. The word ma'akva doesn't go together with truma usually. Maybe the Gemara is just using a slang that's going to come up soon. The word ma'akev is not the word to use. If it talks about truma, it should have just said there's a pasal from eating truma. Avela shlobas mana posela, so no poselas. What does it mean ma'akva, lo ma'akva? I'm being a little bit too nitpicky. We could have gone further without mentioning it, but that is the lashon of the Gemara. It talks about ma'akeves. We'll see right away. The Gemara is going to bring in the subject I'm talking about also. That it's also going to be a question if the son who's not circumcised before 8 days, does that stop the father from eating the korban pesach? Which comes a very yes.
Right now, we're just talking about him. Is the son prevented from being
Eating truma, anointed with truma. Right, and don't harp on the word ma'akra.
Okay.
Just means poselas. I'm Rabbi Zera Toshma. So now we're going to bring a proof from korban pesach. Even though the question was about anointing the child with truma, we're going to bring a raya from korban pesach. Does the son who's less than 8 days old, uncircumcised, does it stop his father from eating truma? Hamdova doesn't like it. What's the tzad? Of course. Why is it? Of course not.
Why? Because it's a sort of it's an answer to you know.
So according to this, right, according to the Gemara presents it that anybody that had a baby within 7 days before Pesach from Zion Nisan, they're not going to be able to eat the korban Pesach.
It doesn't make sense.
Why?
Because the mitzvah didn't come the Chag yet.
Okay, but that's the situation. Yes. Okay. Okay. The Gemara has the Gemara has such a question. The Gemara has the question. I'll bring you a proof. We'll see what this says. I mentioned the two psukim. Rashi brings them down. If we could notice Rashi over here. Here it says, here's the Rashi over here. It says, if you have the Rashi, I'll try to highlight it over here. Here's the Rashi, Vazikrav la'asoso. And by the Avadim, it says, Az yochal bo. The Those are the two psukim. Famila Sachorov, it says, Vazikrav Lasoso. After you have all of your sons circumcised, then you may make the Korban Pesach. When it talks about Avadim that have to be circumcised, it says, then you may eat it. So there's doing the Korban Pesach, the Shchitas Korban Pesach, and then there's the eating the Korban Pesach. The doing of the Korban Pesach was Erev Pesach in the afternoon. That's when you check the Korban Pesach. The Arba Asor, Ben Arbaim. And when you eat the Korban Pesach, and then even of the 15th, by the Seder. So when a pasuk talks about that your sons have to be circumcised, it says when you make the Korban Pesach, when you what? Vazikrav laso so. No. The person approaches laso so to do it, to make the Korban Pesach. Laso so means to do the Korban Pesach, which is on the 14th in the afternoon.
Well, I thought Yikraf would be the Korban.
No, the Krav is the person. Vazikrav, no, the person should approach to do the Korban Pesach. After he has his,
okay, but in any case, that's the 14th.
right, and that person says Oz Yochal Bo, that means that's the 15th, that the eve of the 15th, the night. Let's say that one is the afternoon and one is that evening. So by the Mila Sachorov, by the son, it says to do the Korban Pesach, he has to have his son circumcised. By the Avodim, it says in order to eat the Korban Pesach, your slaves have to be circumcised. But the Brisa says that both halachas apply to both. Here it goes. The pasuk only says, if you read the pasuk alone with the drasha, you'd only know that the sons, Zechorov, his male sons, stop him from eating a Korban Pesach if they're not circumcised when he makes the Korban Pesach, b'shas asiyah. And Avadim, his slaves, stop him from eating Korban Pesach if they're not circumcised, b'shas achila, from eating the Korban Pesach. Both of them apply to both, that if his son is uncircumcised, no difference if it's b'shas the making of the Korban Pesach or by eating the Korban Pesach, or the slave is uncircumcised, no difference if it's making the Korban Pesach or eating the Korban Pesach, they all apply to both. Talmud Lama, uz l'gzeira shava. But all the time it says the word uz. Like Rashi brought down, one place it says uz yikrav la'asoso, one place it says uz yochal bo. So the uz is going to be a gzeira shava, that both of them apply to both. So what do we have? That you can have a case of somebody who his slave or his son was not interfering when he made the Korban Pesach on the 14th Erev Pesach afternoon, but when it came to night, he was interfering. That's a riddle. How do you get it?
He was chal on the 15th, was his chal the 8th day.
So then it should have been in the morning also, the on the 15th or the 14th.
No, the 8th day would be the 15th.
He was
The
only
15th has to be during the day.
The meal is only during the day. The bris milah is only the 15th in the morning, but in the night. What's the difference? Give me a case where there's something happened between the 14th in the afternoon and that evening. Find it, because the Korban Pesach Shchita is the 14th in the afternoon, and even the Korban Pesach is that evening. Find a case where the problem arose between the Shchita and the Achila, between the 14th afternoon and that evening.
The next day?
Not the next day, that evening.
Shchita was in
The baby was born.
The baby is born. The meal is not. The baby was born. When was the baby born?
Between those two times, between the afternoon and the night.
And it means. So what are you saying? That he can't. What are you saying? That he can't eat the Korban Pesach
Because he wasn't circumcised.
Because the baby wasn't circumcised, he was just born.
So you're saying that a baby that's so you're giving in. You're saying that a baby who's even though less than 8 days old and you can't circumcise him,
Just was born.
he's not allowed to eat the father can eat the Korban Pesach because he has an uncircumcised son. Even before you took the other side.
That's the only way.
That's the most big.
Against what you-
Okay, so Moshe's honest. What could he do? He says, if that's what it says, that's what it says. He said, I would have said, he
We're
would
going
have.
to learn that way. Find another way.
That's what he wanted to find another way.
Okay, so what's the other
Another way of learning.
How could it be that the problem arose between the Shechita and the Achila? That you have to have a pasuk to say that even though there was no problem by the making of the Korban Pesach on the 14th afternoon, but the problem arose till that evening. And now it comes to the evening, can't eat the Korban Pesach because he has an uncircumcised son. What's the case? Moshe said, it must be that he was born. Yes, please.
If the baby was sick and you go 8 days.
Right, the Gemara is going to get to that. The Gemara is going to
He
get
was
to
born.
that. That's going further. But first, Moshe is saying,
He was born after he offered the Korban Pesach.
right, that would be the case.
He
That
didn't have a
comes.
son when he offered
Right.
it, and now
And
he has
then-
a son who's
right.
uncircumcised.
He was born Pesach 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. He already did the Korban Pesach, and then when it comes the Shechita, he had no son. He has allowed to do the Korban Pesach, but the pasuk has to say that even then there's a problem that if he has an uncircumcised son at the time of eating the Korban Pesach, that means that the son that's born and he's not yet 8 days old, but he's uncircumcised son. So we told him don't need to come Pesach. That's a raya that even if he's less than 8 days, the uncircumcised child stops the parents from eating. The mother, the father. That's the most raya. That's Reb Zera's raya. Reb Zera Tashma. אין לי אלא מילה זכר בשעס נסיעה, עבד בשעס אכילה. ולאן ניתן נסה אמר של זה וזה, תמוד למה זז לגזר שווה. Now, how do you get such a case? So the Eved wouldn't be a problem. There's the Eved and the son. The Eved is a simple case that he bought the Eved in the afternoon. That's okay. In the morning, in the afternoon, in late afternoon, and after he did the Korban Pesach, he did the Korban Pesach without Eved, and then he bought. Then Pesach he needs an Eved. He bought Eved. He saw it's busy. He bought an Eved, and now the Eved is uncircumcised. Uncircumcised. So then we say he can't eat the Korban Pesach. Bishlama avada mishkachas la disnu b'shas achila v'lesnu b'shas asiya. It could have been a case we had no problem when he did the Korban Pesach, but now there's a problem when he eats the Korban Pesach. Kigon there's avninu. Veini, that he bought him in between, after the Shchitas Korban, before the Achilas Korban, he bought him. Ella Zechora, first white line. Zechora, this new b'shas achila v'lesnu b'shas asiya hechem mishkachas la. How could it be a case that he had no problem of having uncircumcised son when he shechted the Korban Pesach, and now when he's eating the Korban Pesach, he has uncircumcised son? It must be like Moshe said, Lav dishalad ben asiya lachila. It must be he was born. Shramina avela shlo b'zman. Have you avela? So it comes out that's to be a proof that even though it's before the time, he's not supposed to circumcise me yet. But he's called an oral, and you have an uncircumcised son, you can't be in the Korban Pesach. So even if it doesn't make sense to us, that's what it seems to say. So the solution to this is going to be to find a different case. A different case how the like Chaim David wanted to find. What's the case that another scenario how the problem arose after the Shechita, besides being born. We're saying being born is not a problem because he's not 8 days old. So the Gemara tries. First Rabbi says it's impossible. The Tizbra, Himolo calls a Choram Rachmana, Vazikav Lasaso. The Pasuk says, Rabbi seems to say that the question is not a question in the first place. The Pasuk says, don't do the Korban Pesach if you have uncircumcised son. It doesn't say that. It says, circumcise the males and then bring the Korban. That means the Pasuk never tells you that you can't do it. The Pasuk says, do something. It can't be, according to this situation, it's going to be that he can't do anything about it. It's going to be that he has a child born with less than 8 days. Within 8 days before Pesach, he had a son born. He can't do anything about it. He can't
do something about it, and he does.
The pasuk is mashma, do something. The pasuk doesn't say don't eat the Korban Pesach if you have uncircumcised son. The pasuk says circumcise him, and you're saying that it's a problem. You can't circumcise him. The pasuk, if it is bro, Himolo calls the Choram Rachmana Vazikav Lasaso. The pasuk says circumcise your sons and then bring the Korban Pesach. You can't be malam. So that can't be pshat. So Rabbi seems to take sides that there's no, it can't be. It can't be that if he's not yet the time, that the Torah meant to say that he can't. But we still stuck. So now we have to have a pshat in the Brisa. What's the case of the Brisa have to tell us that he's became unfit. The father became unfit between the Shechita and the Chila. So this is what Dr. Fine started saying. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He had a fever. The baby had a fever. The baby was sick. He was already 8 days old. And it's the day to do the circumcision. But he wasn't able to because the baby was sick. So when he did the Shechita, the fact that he was sick is not considered a problem. It means not only we're saying that if he can't malam because he's not 7 to 8 days old yet, even if there's another onus, any kind of onus that stops the father from circumcising his son, the Torah is not talking about him. The Torah is only talking about him if you could circumcise and you don't bring the Korban Pesach.
What does he do all 7?
I didn't say that yet.
You didn't say.
I just said
he got to have fever.
Right. He got out of the fever.
What was the thing about Hailaf Bar Milsa? So then you don't have any. What Hailaf Bar Milsa means?
Bar Mehila.
The case.
How about Mehila? Mehila means mohel. Hailaf Bar Mehilahu. You have that word Mehila.
Mehila. What does that mean?
Mohel. You can't circumcise him.
Oh, he's not ready to be.
Because he's not yet 8 days old.
Yeah.
So Rava says that for sure, if he's not ready to be circumcised, if you can't tell him go circumcise, there is no. He doesn't get hold. The father doesn't get held back from being the Korban Pesach.
Like what Hamdan was.
Right,
but here he was.
And here also
8 days old, but he had a fever.
Right, and he's also you can't tell him circumcise. The doctor says don't circumcise. Hashem says don't circumcise. So this case also he's not going to be unfit because his son is uncircumcised at the time of the Shechita. Because
the mitzvah is to wait.
He's not allowed to circumcise. He has a fever. He's not allowed to circumcise him. So he's also not being pushed away. The Torah doesn't invalidate the father from being the Korban Pesach. You can call that. You can call that also.
Bar Mehila.
So the case was that his fever broke after the father did the Shechita, and now the son got out of the fever broke, so it's circumcised now. And if he doesn't, then he can't eat the Korban Pesach. That's the case where the problem arose after the Shechita, before the Achila. But the Gemara says not true. The Gemara is going to argue that Allah is after a child had a fever, it's not good enough just to break the fever. He has to wait another 7 days to get healthy. You have to give him his shut. That Allah is after baby had a fever, so then you don't maul him as soon as the fever goes down. You have to wait 7 days after that.
Today, if the baby is yellow,
Right.
okay, and then you'd have to wait 7 days?
No. That's what it was going to say. It depends what his problem was. If it was a fever, then you have to wait 7 days. If it wasn't, there was some kind of local problem, and they included that.
If in the morning the baby is
Right.
yellow, and then in the afternoon.
So they
it's
do the
not
meal
yellow,
right
then
away.
they do the
Right.
purpose.
Right. But for a fever, you have to wait 7 days, and the doctors will tell us which other sicknesses they have to wait 7 days. Dr. Fine, whenever you, when do we wait 7 days? But here it talks about a fever. So that's the most problem. When they say like Shiva, if the case would have been that he had a fever, so then you have to wait 7 days. It's not going to be that he became fit to circumcise in the give him another 7 days.
The case must be somebody already waited 7 days.
Oh, that's the most answer. Very good. Everyone's hot today. So the Gemara says on the bottom line, the Avina like Shiva. Maybe the case would have been that he got better. It means he's already
on the 7th day.
And the fever broke 7 days ago. Now this is the 7th day. And he got this, but then the Gemara says, if it's the 7th day, what's the difference between the afternoon and then the evening? In the afternoon also, by the time of the Shechita, also he should have been unfit. We have to get a case. Oh, that's the Gemara's answer. Very good. Yeah, you're composing the Gemara today. So that's the Gemara's kasha. So then they should have circumcised him for the morning already. How come by the time of the Shechita he was okay? It means we're saying that the father was okay at the time of the Shechita, but he wasn't okay at the time of the eating of the Korban Pesach. If the case was that it's the 7th day, and that's why he should have circumcised him before the eating, he should have circumcised him before the Shechita also. The Gemara answered what Chaim David said, that after the baby gets better, the fever breaks, you have to look at the clock and wait 7 complete days, 7 times 24 hours.
What was the phrase down here was what happened?
You have to wait till 7 days. It says 7 days. We thought that 7 days meet on the 7th day. He could we give him. We gave him 7 days. It's already 7 days. That was the kasha. We should have circumcised him from the morning already. If the case was
7 days.
And today's day 7. Pesach is day 7.
What, the 14th?
Yes.
Then we should have done it today.
In the morning. And therefore the Shechita also should have been a problem. The father was not to say they shouldn't have shafted the Shechita also. You don't need a special pasuk to say at the evening, because this case would have been that not at the afternoon.
7 days you can do one part of a day is like a whole day.
That's what the Gemara thought. The Gemara thought that to wait 7 days means on the 7th day you can do any time in the morning already. The same way the Gemara is going to say right away, when the baby's born, when a baby's born, as far as the 8th day, you don't wait 8 times 24. You say for the time that he's born on a Sunday. We don't care what time.
Right, as long as it's
So also, right. So the Gemara thinks when the fever breaks, so then you also wait 7 days. On the 7th day to be allowed to.
And then you turn the page and the answer is.
And there's Meslay. It's only 7 times 24 hours. So that's to be. So it could be that happens in the middle of the day. So the case was that the fever broke 7 days ago, and in the afternoon after the Shechita, like whatever, 4 or 5 o'clock. So the Shechita you did 3 o'clock, and then you're okay because you weren't allowed to circumcise the son. But then it comes. By the time you should have eaten the Korban Pesach, you should have circumcised it because there was time to circumcise after 7 times 24. But the Gemara says it doesn't seem like that. They don't have to have 24 times 7. But Tani Luda is the name of a Tana. He said over a brisa. Luda said over a brisa. Yom Avroso Kyomi Voldo. The day that he gets better is like the day that he's born. And the Gemara thinks it means my love means it means to say the real point is to say that you can't. Right. The first thing Gemara thought to say is that. The point he's saying is that you have to consider him born again the same way when he's born. You have to wait 8 days. Also, when he gets better, you have to wait. The same thing. If he got better on a Sunday, you have to wait till next Sunday. The same way, if he would have been born on Sunday, you can't do the circumcision until next Sunday. Yeah. So also, if he gets better, you have to wait as if he would have been born now. And if that's true, then it doesn't have to do Mace Lace. My love, if that's true, so the same way when he's born, you don't have to wait 8 times 24. You just wait until the beginning of the day. So too, the day that he gets better, you don't need Mace Lace. But the Gemara says, no, it doesn't mean that. It's even more stringent, we'll call it. That the point he's coming to say is that you don't circumcise him right away, you got to wait. Not the next day, but the same day, you have to wait until 7 days. But when he meant to say Yom Yivoldo, he didn't mean in that aspect that you don't need 24. Here you have to have 7 times 24. When he's born, you do the Milah on the 8th day, even in the morning. You don't have to care times 24. You don't do 7 times 24. Any time of the 8th day is good enough. But by the time that, but by getting better, you do have to wait 7 times 24, and that's the halacha. When the fever breaks, we look at the clock, and then you can't do the Milah in the morning. You have to do the Milah 24 times 7 after he got better. So the more, yes.
So that's what we said, and then we had a kasha on that.
We have the answer now. That we
And then
okay,
we had a kasha on the answer.
and now we have an answer to the answer.
Resolved it, and
Right.
You do need
24, and therefore the pshat, the case we're looking for a case where he became fit to circumcise after the shechita before the evening, and the case is going to be that 7 days ago the fever broke at an hour that he was already able to do the shechita before, and he wasn't as fit at that time to do the circumcision, and then he became better and he was fit. If the father doesn't circumcise him, then he's not allowed to eat the korban pesach. There's a couple of more answers now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 more answers. 4 more cases why the parents or the father was not held back from shechting the korban pesach, but he was held back from eating the korban pesach.
Besides this case.
Besides this case. Yes, besides this case, we had the first case to talk about that he was born. If it would have held that even an uncircumcised 1 day old is that would have been a possibility. But the Gemara doesn't like that side, and Arei L'Shlo B'Zmana does not hold back the father if he's not yet 8 days old. And now we're finding other kinds of onsim that happened between the shechita and the evening. The first case was that he was sick with a fever and it broke 7 days ago, and that the shechita was okay. He was still not yet allowed to circumcise him, and now the eating is already should have circumcised him already. Another terrorist, that this halacha was only by a fever, then you have to wait 7 days. But if he has some other kind of ache, here it says eye ache, which the doctor will tell us that the baby has a problem with his eyes, and therefore they can't circumcise him. Over there, you don't have to wait 7 days after he gets better. Over there, as soon as he gets better, like you said, the yellow, if the baby's yellow, so then if he gets better, you can circumcise it right away. And the case was that on the 8th day, the Erev Pesach is the 8th day, and by the shechita, he still was sick, and you couldn't have circumcised him, and then he got better, you should have circumcised him, and that'll be a case where the pasuk has to tell you that even the achila also, the father has to be without any uncircumcised children.
Mr. What's the Linuka?
Linuka is a baby. Isbach is healed. The kovlei ain't linuka.
The kid had a problem with his eyes, and he got healed.
In the meanwhile, beni, in between, means between the
So how's that different from the first case?
The first case was he had a fever,
Yeah.
and he had to have gotten rid of the fever 7 days ago.
Oh, now he doesn't need 7 days. He
Right. Doesn't need 7 days.
But while his eyes are hurting, he
Cannot circumcise him. Right.
Whatever you call it.
He's unfit for circumcision, and the father could do the korban pesach.
Well, if his eyes are hurting, he's unfit for circumcision. But once they're not hurting, immediately he could do it.
Right, and he should have. And if he didn't, so then he can't eat the korban pesach at night.
Okay.
Another case, Rav Amar could go and show you a simple case that the parents are in jail and they can't do the circumcision because they're stuck.
Oh, they're in jail.
They're in jail.
And he's 8 days and ready.
He's 8 days ready, but they could, and then they got freed. They got freed, and now they could have done it. So b'shash shechita, they weren't doing shechting, but someone was shechting for them. They were minuyim, they were part of the korban pesach, and they shechted the korban pesach for the father. And then he got freed, so he should have circumcised his son. If he didn't, he's not going to be able to eat the korban pesach. Another case. That the baby was a tumtum, he was covered, the genitals were covered, and he couldn't circumcise him. And then the doctor made an operation, and now he could circumcise him. So when they did the shechita, it was still unfit for circumcision because he had skin covering the whole area. And then when they did the operation, now he's able to. So then we tell the father, circumcise him. And if you don't, you're not going to be able to eat the korban pesach.
Because there's no danger to his life.
Right.
Just...
Right. Rav Shavia Omar, this is the last teretz. This teretz is, I would say, just for the drill, not that the Gemara means actually that this was what the case of Brisa means, but the Gemara is going to talk about halachically if the next case theoretically would have happened. And the case is going to be that it was impossible to circumcise him because he was born, but he was still not fully born. The bottom half of his body was still inside the mother's womb. He was being born, his head came out. Once his head came out, you start the clock of 8 days, but it wasn't moving. Nothing was moving. I don't think that this would happen nowadays. For sure, it wouldn't happen because they're gonna pull out the baby. But here is a case where the baby is coming out, and 8 days the mother's over there. 8 days the baby wasn't coming out. The Gemara talks if the baby could live, but it's a theoretical case. The Gemara just wants to give all the halachas over here. So it'll be, that's what we want, is that the 8th day, Erev Pesach is the 8th day. Until then, by the time of the Shechita, the baby was not, his head was out for 8 days already, but his goof didn't come out, so it wasn't possible to circumcise him because the orla was still inside the mother's womb. And then he came out fully, mazel tov, and then we're supposed to now circumcise him. If he didn't, so then we'll tell the father you can eat the Korban Pesach. So here is more for the theoretical case, not the actual case, not the actual. Here's the case. The prosdor is the part of the woman, the outer part of the womb, probably it's even the outer part of the body, the lips. And then the head is out, so you start counting the 8 days. And he still didn't, at the time of the Shechita, it could mean more than the head also, the head, whatever, but the part of the body that is circumcised, the organ, was not yet out. So he wasn't he was in a jail. He was in the jail of his mother's womb. He wasn't able to get to the orla because the mother's womb was blocking. Tomorrow has some problems with that. Could he live? You have questions?
Yeah, why does it have to be a case for 8 days where you could just be an hour? Just
No, you don't circumcise till the 8th day. We're saying that the first 7 days is not a problem. We're saying that till the baby is void for circumcision is not a problem. That's what we're going.
No, so I'm saying, so if the baby, let's say this happens, the baby is born Monday night, right before, the next day.
When is Pesach? When is Pesach?
No, so it's 8 days later.
Yeah.
It's Pesach, but it's we don't know now if it's a 7-day baby or
No. We go with the head. We go with the head. The head.
If the head comes out, then
the nurse is supposed to look at it. When the head comes out, the nurse is supposed to, not the forehead. The forehead. When is the baby born? When the forehead comes out. That's when the nurse is supposed to write down the part of it when the baby was born.
Right.
Even though it took take another hour until the rest of the body comes out,
Right.
It shouldn't, the chalila. But the time that the forehead comes out, that's when the baby is halachically born. If it's before Shabbos, it's before Shabbos. If it's after Shabbos, it's after Shabbos. If it'll be before Shalosh time, the baby's head came out, but he wasn't actually born until afterwards, he's a Shabbos baby. Everything depends on the forehead. Okay, here's the case now that 8 days ago, before Pesach, before I Pesach. So what?
Which part of the fart?
I think Padachas. I think it says Padachas.
I couldn't hear what he asked.
What?
What did he ask?
Which how much of the forehead? I forgot if it says Ro Padachta or Padachta. I think it says Padachta. Okay, I'm not sure. But the kasha is it possible for him to live? The Gemara doesn't think he's going to make it 8 days. If he came out 8 days ago and he's coming out for 8 days, but once the baby's born, the parts in the baby. This Rabbi Miller talks about a lot, that the whole system changes at the time of birth. Before that, and the heart, that's why sometimes if the heart doesn't get closed up, Dr. Fine, I'm talking like I know something, but if you could help us out. But there's a lot of things that change when the baby's born, the whole system changes. And it starts breathing, and also the navel there talks about the one understands that he doesn't get any more nourishment from his mother. If it wouldn't happen, this miracle at the time of birth, he wouldn't be able to live. So the Gemara is asking, the baby wouldn't be able to live. So he's not getting nourished from his mother, the Gemara thinks, and also not able to nurse him. So this, I didn't understand what the Gemara means. I seem to understand that the mother's not able to nurse him in this situation if he can't get the breast. So maybe it can be somebody else, but the Gemara doesn't understand like that. So therefore, the Gemara is asking, how is he going to live? He's not going to live 8 days like this in such a position. The Gemara says that the fever is sustaining him. The Gemara says someplace that when a person has a fever, he doesn't have to eat. The fever sustains him. That's how the Gemara looks at it. That the fever sustains. The same way you have to have sustenance, so you have to have food, but the fever sustains. But the Gemara says, whose fever? Ishta the man, whose fever? We went back to that before already. If he has a fever, you have to wait 7 days after the fever breaks. Yes?
If his head is out, then just give him a bottle.
So they didn't have bottles in those days.
What?
You're thinking of modern thoughts that he has a bottle. They didn't have any bottles. Give him a Turner. They didn't have the Turner.
So the only way that babies ate a couple hundred years ago
Only from a mother or from a nurse. There was no bottles. The Gemara did say something a couple of pages ago. The Gemara said something about it with the cholav and beitzim, but the Pasha says they have no bottles. And if the mother didn't have milk and they didn't find a nursing mother, a nurse, what do they call her? There's a in Hebrew, in English, what's it called?
Wet nurse.
Wet nurse.
Right, the wet nurse. So that was a parnasa for women, that they kept nursing other people's babies. But if you didn't have that, there was no maternal. So that's the most kasha. How is he living? So first, the Gemara says the fever. When he has a fever, that's sustaining him. But the Gemara says if he's the one who has the fever, then you'd have to wait 7 days after the fever breaks. His mother's fever. His mother has a fever, and she's supporting that was sustaining him. But that's pretty hard, teretz. The Gemara says, so Tais says the different gersa, but a simple pshat, that the word not is mo'oi, but you see Tais here, the top Tais it says ma'ura. That's the that word, ma'ura. And he says that he is sustained by his mother. In this case, when ma'ura means that he's intertwined. That means that as long as the baby's umbilical cord is still attached to the mother, so he could be sustained. He could be sustained from the mother. The sustenance to get from the mother, even if he's in such a position, he doesn't have to have nursing from his mouth because he's getting sustenance from the mother's placenta. So what had happened? What happened? That's the zoom out a second. The Gemara talked about Orel Shalobas Manu. That means that before 8 days old is that a problem? So Rava seems to say it's not a problem. Rava seems to say it's not a problem. Orel Shalobas Manu is not a problem. At least it's not clear. The Gemara could just be saying that the case of the Torah is talking about a case circumcised. So Rava says your case in the pasuk is not true because the pasuk only says a problem of not eating, of not the father not eating only if he could circumcise. If he can't circumcise, it's not a problem. But the Mefarshim still say the Gemara didn't answer the question. Is the first case about giving truma? Is there a problem to anoint a baby less than 8 days old who's not circumcised? Is there a problem to anoint him? And most Mefarshim say that the Gemara didn't answer the question. We left it hanging. The Rambam seems to say that it's not a problem. Less than 7 days old is not called an oral. You would be able to anoint him because he's not called an oral until he's 8 days old that you're supposed to circumcise him.
This last point here, Machai means what? That the
He could live. The baby can live.
If it's through the fever of the mother.
No, now we finished the fever already. That's period. If he's still connected to the mother, he could live because of the mother. This was Iboy Sema, new teretz. One teretz was he's living from the fever of the mother. Iboy Sema, another teretz, he's living from the sustenance of the mother because he's still connected. If he's not connected, if he's disconnected from the mother, then he's not going to be able to eat on his own. But if he's connected to his mother, then he'll get right.
But if he's still connected by the umbilical cord, then
so it's still working.
Situation could happen.
Right.
And the father wouldn't be able to give
to circumcise him, and then when he comes out, then he should circumcise him. There's a little custom. There's a custom that not a joke that they call a little baby before the meal. They call him Arala. You ever heard of that? Arala. They call him Arala because Orel. but it's not true because the Gemara comes out according to the Psak. He's not called an Orel. He's not called an Orel until the 8th day. In the first 7 days, he's not called uncircumcised. He's not called an Orel. The way either the Gemara has the suffix about it or the Rambam comes out in the Psak that he's not called an Orel until the 8th day. The Gemara continues. How about a person who's tamei and he has to be sprinkled with Ephah Parah Aduma on the 3rd day and the 7th day? A person's tamei mace. If he became in contact with a dead corpse, so he has to have sprinkling on him from the Parah Aduma water on the 3rd and 7th day. Could he have that sprinkling while he's uncircumcised? Or it doesn't work? It has to be circumcised in order that it should work. I don't know why. Taisus asks, he doesn't know why why should it be a problem? Why should you think that he has to be circumcised in order that the hazah, the sprinkling, should work? But the Gemara considers it a chiddush. That it is true, but it's a chiddush. Oriel Mekabel Hazah, an uncircumcised person could receive sprinkling. The sprinkling has nothing to do with the circumcision, it has to do with tumah. So for some reason, you might have thought that as long as he's uncircumcised, the hazah doesn't work. He wouldn't be able to get out of his tumah mace. If he had contact with the dead, then he has to be sprinkled on the 3rd and 7th day from the ashes of the paraduma. It doesn't take effect if he's oral. Kamash Malan, it does work. But the Gemara, I think it's a chiddush. This doesn't know what the chiddush is. But that Gemara is going to prove that it does work. I'll prove to you that our forefathers, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, that they must have gotten sprinkled when they were still uncircumcised. Shenema. When they crossed the Yarden, they came into Eretz Yisrael on the 10th of Nisan, and then they brought the Korban Pesach. It says in the pasuk they brought the Korban Pesach. They came to Eretz Yisrael on the 10th. They circumcised, and they did the Korban Pesach on the 14th. And the Gemara says that they couldn't have circumcised the same day that they crossed. The first day that they travel, you don't circumcise, you have to rest. And therefore, the earliest they could have circumcised was the 11th of Nisan. 11, 12, 13, 14. That wouldn't have been enough time. It means they have to have the sprinkling has to be on the 3rd and 7th day of the Tumah. It means when a person became Tamei Meis, they sprinkle on him on the, not before the 3rd day of the Tumah, and then you have to wait 4, 5, 6, 7. So on the 14th, if the 14th is going to be day 7, then it wouldn't have been enough to have done it on day 11. They would have had to done it at least on day 10. If on day 10th of Nisan, they would have sprinkled, that would have been the 3rd day of the Tumah. They became Tamei before that, a long time ago. Like Rashi says that they become Tamei the whole 40 years. They were in the Midbar. Whenever somebody died, that's to take care of them. So most of the people were Tamei. They had contact with the Mace. So now they came to Eretz Yisrael, and it says, and then they did Milah. It says that Yeshua did Bris Milah, and they couldn't have done it if they would. They couldn't have done it on the 10th. Earliest was on the 11th, but the sprinkling had to be on the 10th. Then it would be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That would have been day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would have worked. If they would have done the sprinkling on the first day they came on the 10th of Nisan, then they could have done the second sprinkling, which is the 7th day, on the 14th. That would have been good. Then they could have done the Korban Pesach. But if the Orel, before he circumcised, the Hazah doesn't work, so then they couldn't have, because on the 10th they were still uncircumcised. So it must be that they did the Hazah even when they were uncircumcised. Because the Pasuk says that the people came out of Yad on the 10th of the first month. They couldn't have done circumcision on that day because they just came from the traveling. They were weak. So when was the earliest that they could have done the Milah? On the 11th. When did they do the Hazah? It must be when they were still Arelim, because the earliest that they could have done the Hazah of the Shlishi had to be Shlishi Tishvi, has to be a difference of 5 days, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It has to be that if the 7th was the 14th of Nisan, so the 3rd had to be the 10th of Nisan. So they were still not circumcised. That's the Gemara's proof. That it could be, that must be that Orel could be receive the sprinkling. But the Gemara says, who said they did it Korban Pesach? This kasha is just to awaken everybody. Maybe there was no Korban Pesach. It's fresh Pesach. Let's talk about the Siv. Yasos Pesach. Look over there in Yeshua. It says they made a Korban Pesach. So they did a Korban Pesach, and they were not circumcised until the 11th. So it must be that the Hazah was earlier. Maybe the Pesach was not when they were Torah. They thought were not able to become Torah. They were not able to become Torah. Maybe they were Takatame. Maybe it didn't work. That the Bryce says perish that they were Torah. From the Pasuk you have no Raya. The Pasuk you have no Raya because it could be that they did the Korban Pesach B'tumah, and there was such a thing. Pesach Haba B'tumah. Most of the tzibur was Tamei. They're allowed to do the Pesach, even that Tamei. But there's a Bryce that says they did it B'Tara. If they did it B'Tara, so you see that they were able to do the Hazah even when they were still a Reilim.
Wait, what is the Pasuk?
The Pasuk. That's a Bryce. Tanya Behedia, it's a brisa. Malu v'tavlu v'asu b'schein b'tara. That's all a brisa.
Well, there you said it's nefarish.
It's not a pasuk. I'm saying it's not a pasuk.
Okay.
No, the first is that they did the Korban Pesach. That's it. The Asos a Pesach. That's pasuk. It's strange. The Gemara says the Kasha maybe they did the Korban Pesach. The Gemara says right away. It says they did the Korban Pesach. Yeah. Yeah, and that is a brisa.
That's a brisa.
That wouldn't be a pasuk. Yeah. The rest of the Gemara now till the bottom is parentheses. There's also something here about Drash over there, but it says Yeshua when they circumcised. So it's a side point. A bonus. There's a din of Mila and Priya. Mila is the cutting the foreskin, and Priya is that there's a membrane that's under the foreskin, and that also has to be revealed. You have to also cut it or bend it backwards in order to reveal the corona, right? That has to be revealed. So that mitzvah, it says here, Avraham Avinu wasn't given that mitzvah. Avraham Avinu only told Mila on the foreskin, but the Priya, the membrane, that was only told to Yeshua. Shenemar, Vayisei Amar Hashem al Yeshua, Asei Lecha Chavos Surim, Veshuv Molis Yeshua, Molis Bnei Yisrael Shenis. Hashem told Yeshua at that time when he crossed the Yarden, make Chavos Surim. Chavos means, Surim, they say means a rock, but it doesn't mean a rock, it means something sharp. Make a sharp tool and circumcise Bnei Israel a second time again. And the Gemara is going to say that again means that there are two parts to it. There's going to be also a Priya. Do two times, do two things. That it should be also the Mila, also the Priya. So that Rash was only said to Yeshua and it wasn't said to Avram. The Gemara says kasha for him.
You know, it seems because it's just speaking to a mother, like a gold is a gold. So the priya, I think, goes back by itself.
What does it mean it goes back?
The membrane that you make priya, they tear.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you don't tear it, it remains in place, or it rolls back by itself.
If you don't tear it, so then it's covered. Everything stays. It's covered. You have to tear it and then also bend it back and make a bandage that it shouldn't go back again. As far as I know, I don't know the details. I'm not a moha, but the Gemara says, where's the drash over here? Well, the Pashup Pshat that it says that people are not circumcised in since Mitzrayim, and that's why they're circumcised again. The pasuk says that they didn't circumcise during the midbar, the 40 years, and that's why the pasuk in the pasuk is they should circumcise again. So the word says no. My shuv. What's the word shuv? The shuv is the extra word that it says again. Bimal Yisrael again. So again means 2 times. That it means that it should be also the orla, the foreskin, and also the priya, the membrane. The priya. That shows that it's supposed to be. That's the drash to say priya. Well, my shenis, then that's not a kasha. Why does it over there with Israel shenis? And again, do it a second time. There's a room for extra drash. La kushe sof mila, tchilas mila, ma tchilas mila, ma kebes af sof mila, ma akven bo ditnan elovein tzitz and akven samila basa chofes roba Torah veinochel betruma. That's coming to tell you another point that even if he did a mila, but there was some what's the word of tzitzin? How do we say tzitzin? Protrusions, strands of skin that still were not cut. That also is going to stop. It holds back that the mila was not done good enough, and therefore you have to go back and cut off those strands of skin in order to make it a kosher mila, and that's called sof mila. What's considered the strands, the protrusions that hold back the mila from being kosher? If robe of the corona is covered by a strand of skin, even though it's not, like Rashi says, or the Muslim say, he's not like truma because he's an oral. If the skin of the foreskin, which is covering the robe of the height of the corona, that makes it that it shouldn't be a kosher mila, even though it's not robe of the circumference, but it's robe of the height. One little strand that's protruding that covers robe of the height of the corona also makes that it shouldn't be a kosher mila. Okay, Ad Khan. Yashikor everybody. Thank you.